Today we've got quite a big job on the Audi TT, and that's because since the day I picked it up it's had quite a severe coolant leak, which means I've been topping this reservoir up with coolant at least once every 2 days, and it's costing me a lot of money. And that's because I don't want to use tap water in the reservoir, because all the additives in the tap water can cause excess corrosion within the engine, and with the colder weathers in the UK, if we get a freezing night, it could then potentially freeze and cause further damage down the line. But after a bit of investigation, I think I might have found the highest point of the coolant leak, and it looks like it's coming from a thermostat housing, which unfortunately for me is right under there, buried right at the back and bolted to the front of the engine. But no matter how big a job is, I'll always give it a go, and that's why we have a brand new thermostat housing, so we can swap the old one out, because I think it's that O-ring that's perished causing the coolant leak. We've also got a brand new water pump, because while the coolant's out and the hoses are off, I might as well change it, along with a timing belt and a timing belt tensioner. But doing the timing belt and the water pump will depend on how long it takes us to do the thermostat housing, because this TT is my daily and I do need it for work tomorrow, but we'll see how it goes. So the only thing left to do now is get straight into it. So now the TT's in the unit, we need to let it cool down before we remove the cap on that reservoir. And that's because the coolant system, when it's hot, is pressurised, and if you remove that cap while the coolant system is still hot, all the coolant will come out the cap in a big rush, and you will get severely burned, because the temperatures in that cooling system probably around 90 degrees at full temp. So don't move that cap until you know it's completely cold. So now we'll just have to wait.
2 hours later.
I think it's time we check the cooling system. So the coolant looks like it's cool enough to be able to work on it. So even though the temperatures are low on the dash, we still need to be careful when we remove the cap, because there could still be a bit of pressure in the cooling system. So the best way to do this, I've found, is get a rag, get it over the lid, but again, be very careful when you're unscrewing it, because it will hiss, or it might. And that seems okay. So now I know the cooling system is okay to work on, but be careful because it still will be warm. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pump as much of the coolant out of the reservoir as I can, and this is because when I take the radiator hose off later on whilst I'm under the car, I don't really want all that coming down with it, so I might as well get rid of it now. So one thing I've done while I was waiting for the coolant system to cool down, other than reading the newspaper, is I've wrote up a big instruction manual on how to do this job. And a huge thank you to Poder from the ttforum.co.uk, because they made the write-up on how to do this. I've never done this before, nor did they have any idea how I was going to tackle it, but I found that write-up and it was the best thing in the world. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open the boot, lift the carpet up and disconnect the battery, because we need to remove the alternator. And if you don't disconnect the battery and the 2 terminals on the alternator arc, not only will it spark, but it could cause a fire and you'll probably get injured. So we'll pull the battery cover off, and then using a 10mm, get it on the negative terminal, and it's only the negative terminal we need to disconnect, just so the battery doesn't create a circuit with the alternator cables. And that's the battery disconnected. Move this out the way so it can't possibly arc or remake the circuit. Shove it down the bottom like that. Because we removed the battery, you'll either have to put a code back in on your radio, so make sure you've got that if you need to, and we will also have to reset the windows, because chances are these TTs are notorious for the windows not going all the way up once the battery's being disconnected, but we'll get to that at the end of the video. One thing I did for extra peace of mind is I put the driver's window down, just so if for whatever reason the boot locks up, I can still get into the car without it possibly locking me out. Next we'll put a towel or something over the boot lock, so when you bring the boot down, the boot doesn't fully close and it doesn't latch on you. So now that's step 1 complete. We need to get the car up, get the undertray off and drain the coolant. Now the car is jacked up, we can get underneath it. One thing I always do as a precaution is I'll leave the jack under the sill, even though the axle stands are there, just as a safety measure in case one of them fail for whatever reason, that jack can catch it. So now we'll get the undertray off and we'll drain the coolant. 13mm in the middle of the back, T20 torque bolts at the front, and a whole lot of cable ties. And here you can see the coolant that's been leaking onto the underside. You can see all the pink residue on the engine where the coolant's been drying along with a fresh strip. So yeah, definitely needed doing. But we're going to remove that intercooler pipe there, and we can drain the coolant from behind it from the radiator. To remove the intercooler pipe, you get a flathead screwdriver under the clip and pull it towards you, and then the pipe simply just slides out. That's the intercooler pipe off. Get out the way. Just up there, that is your coolant pipe that needs to come off from that clip. And be prepared to get wet because it's going to go everywhere. So what I'm going to do is get some cardboard behind it just to give it a bit of a guide out. Like so. Hook it underneath and then try and get this pipe off. For anyone who was wondering, coolant doesn't taste nice. Now the coolant's draining under the car, we need to pull this charcoal canister up. That just comes up, push it to one side. Then we need to mark the alternator belt so we can see the rotation, the direction of travel, because when you put this back on, you want to put it back on in the same way so it wears the same way it has in the past. So all I'm going to do for this, put a bit of insulation tape that's quite bright over the belt, like so. Give it a really good push down because you don't want it coming off. And then with the permanent marker, I'm going to mark an arrow pointing to the front of the car, which I think is also the direction of the belt. Next, I'm going to get my 16mm spanner, press the tensioner right down, and then use an old 4mm drill bit, get it in the pin on the tensioner, and that'll lock it in place. You can see it goes in that little housing just there and locks that right in. So now that we've marked the belt and we've pinned the tensioner, we've took the belt off, you need to get those two bolts at the top off, one underneath to remove the tensioner, then there's a bolt down there right at the bottom for the alternator, one at the top, and we can pull the alternator forward, and behind them hoses there is all the alternator connections, so once the alternator is out the way of those hoses, we can take the connections off and we can fully remove the alternator. So I'm going to remove the 3 bolts on the tensioner and we can pull the tensioner out. Those 2 bolts at the top, and that's the one at the bottom you can't see. So now we need to remove the alternator, and to do this we need to take this bottom bolt out, then the top, and then we need to give it a really good wiggle because it is in there quite tight. It will come eventually, you've just got to be persistent with it. And that's the alternator off. Now we need to disconnect the electrical connections. So you need to pry this plastic cover off the ground and nut. Get that nut off. Then you disconnect the connector on the top for the positive terminals. And right round the back of the alternator is a small 8mm nut, which is the clamp for the loom that bolts to the alternator. If you don't get that off, you won't get it out. So when the alternator's in the car like that, you've got that bolt there and that bolt there, which both come out from the front. And behind that, you've got your plug, which is just there, your nut, which is your ground cable that needs to come off. And then just here, there's an 8mm nut that holds the wiring loom for the alternator to the alternator, and you won't get that out if you don't get that off. Now that the alternator's off, you can see the thermostat housing right there. You've got to get that hose off, disconnect that pipe, and unclip that pipe from down there, but there's a sequence to do this. So we'll get that pipe off first, disconnect it from the top, we'll then unbolt and take the metal one out the middle, and then we can take the bottom one off. Then we can remove the thermostat housing. So to remove the metal pipe, there's a bolt on the front of the engine that you need to get off, but mine is badly stripped out, so I can't do it, but I'll show you it anyway. So this is the front of the engine. Right down there is that bolt. That is a M5 spline bit, triple square, whatever you want to call it. But mine, don't know if you'll be able to see, mine is badly rusted out to the point of where it's stripped. So I'm going to grind the head off the bolt with a Dremel just so I can pull that off and then take the threads out and put a fresh bolt in. But if yours is okay, you need to get that off so then we can push that coolant pipe as close to the gearbox as we can to get the rubber hose off the top of the thermostat housing. So I've got a diagram a bit on the end of my cheap Dremel, managed to grind the head off that hose, the bolts on the hose, and as you can see it's now free. So with the clips down there being off, we can now push that hose as close to the gearbox as possible to then get the silicone hoses off there and keep taking the hoses off the thermostat housing. So this car is just a gift that keeps on giving. Down here, just behind this cable housing here, you pull that forward, and as you can see, there's another bolt which is a spline drive. That's also stripped out, and I'm not going through the effort of grinding that one off. So what I've done is, on a thermostat housing, I took the bolt out just there for the metal pipe. I'm going to just try and pull the pipe out the way enough to get the thermostat housing off, get the new one in with that still kind of in situ. But every 20-minute job is one snap bolt away from becoming an absolute pain. So after a long battle, I finally got the thermostat housing out. So when it's on the engine, it's that way around. So there's two bolts that go in the back. There's a push clip that tightens the hose on the bottom, just like the first intercooler hose we took off. And then the pipe that goes there is a fixed metal pipe with a bolt in it. Take that bolt out, and if you were lucky enough to get the bolt out down there, you can push that pipe that way and it makes things so much easier. I, however, was not lucky, so I had to push it out the way as best I can, that black pipe there, and then try and wiggle the thermostat housing out. And I eventually got it out. But that was not an easy job, that's why I didn't record it, and the access isn't great for the camera, so I can't really show you what I was doing. But now that that's out, you just need to put the new thermostat housing in, lubricate the O-ring with some coolant, and then reassemble it all in reverse from how we took it off. And hopefully it doesn't leak. And here's the old thermostat housing, and as you can see from the build-up around the O-ring, it was never ever going to seal again. There's so much corrosion around the O-ring, it's either off the block or it's just a coolant build-up that's been seeping out over time, but it definitely needed changing. So now I finally got the new thermostat housing in, and all the hoses are connected to it. Like so, and you can see it's all bolted up, all the hoses are in. The metal pipe is bolted there as well, and all the bolts on the housing themselves are back in. It's now time to begin the reverse of the strip down process and start bolting everything back up with the alternator, the charcoal filter, and all that. Still in two minds whether to do the timing belt or not, but we'll see. Actually, I'm going to leave the timing belt because this has already took long enough, and I don't think I've got time because I need this car tomorrow for work. If I don't get it finished, I've done it to myself, really. But I am going to do a video on the timing belt and the water pump and fitting them, removing them, timing it all and all that jazz. So if you want to see that, hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the notifications bell so you get an update when I post a video, and just stay tuned with the channel. So let's get back on with this. So we'll get everything put back together, we'll run the car up to temperature, and hopefully it stays there. And we don't have any leaks, because if you have leaks, we're back to square one. So now that everything's bolted back in and the belt's fitted in the right direction based on the way I took it off, we just need to fit the charcoal filter and then we can fill it with coolant, and hopefully it doesn't leak. Oh yeah, and don't forget the radiator hose underneath the car, because I nearly did and I would have dumped all the fresh coolant onto the floor. Once that's in, get the intercooler hose back on, literally just push the hose in, press the clip in, and then that's all the hosing done. Now I'm going to put the negative terminal back on the battery, and then top the car up with coolant, because when I emptied the coolant system on this, I think I emptied out about 3.5 litres, so it's going to take a fair bit to get it going again. So once you drop the car and run the engine a little bit, you'll notice that your coolant will start to slowly depreciate, so you need to keep topping it up, and then when it sits comfortably at a level where it's not going down anymore, top it off to the max. Stick the lid on, and then you can leave it and just let it run for a bit, let it get up to temp to make sure there's no leaks. And once your thermostat opens, you'll probably lose a little bit more coolant, especially if you turn the heating on, because your heater matrix will probably suck a bit more through. So you will need to top it off after this, but just be careful. So if you get the cooling system fully run up to temperature, it will, again, like I said at the start of the video, have pressure in it. So if you take the lid off, you will severely burn yourself, so don't do that. If you need to top it up, let the car completely cool down, then top it off to the max, and just slowly keep an eye on it over the next few days. I'm going to leave the under tray off purely because that way I can monitor the car over the next few days and see if there's any leaks from underneath the car, because you'll have a big patch of coolant on the floor, which hopefully we don't see. So after running the car up to temp and then letting it fully cool down, you can see the reservoir has dropped. So I'm going to top the coolant level back up to the max, put the cap on and monitor it over the next few days. So like I said at the start of the video, once you take your battery out, you will need to reset your windows, and to do this you literally just put your window down, hold it for 5 seconds, put your window up, hold it for 5 seconds, and that should reset the window. If it doesn't work, do it the opposite way around. So Hold it up for 5 seconds, drop it all the way down, and then hold the button for 5 seconds, and that should reset your window, so the one touch works, and they move up to where they should when you close your door. Oh, and if you've got a stock radio, you might need to put your code in so it knows it hasn't been robbed. Now the TT is sat outside, and the GTO is back in its rightful place in the unit. And I'm quite happy that we managed to fix the leak, because so far, fingers crossed, nothing's been coming out the car. But that's going to conclude today's video, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you've liked what you've seen. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notifications bell so you get an update every time I post a video, and I'll see you in the next one.
Afraid to turn out the